Hello everyone, welcome to Psychology 346, Social Psychology, and today we're going to be talking about heuristics. So what are heuristics? Well, they're simply mental shortcuts that are aimed to reduce the complexity of the world that we have to interact with on a daily basis. They increase efficiency of thinking, they increase automaticity of thinking, and they allow us to navigate our daily life as quickly and efficiently as possible. So what are some of these heuristics that we use? Well, one is the primacy heuristic, and that's kind of focuses on the fact that early information that we encounter tends to be more important in our minds. So one example of this is what's known as the anchoring and adjustment effect. So for example, if we see a string of numbers, the first few numbers that we see are going to be more influential on our thoughts and behaviors than the last few numbers are. So for example, I think on the slides I have a list of along multiplication. The multiplication string that starts with 1 and 2, people on average estimate a lower number for that compared to a multiplication string that starts with the number 8 and 7. So this is even when people know that these numbers are randomly assigned and arbitrary. People do tend to use this early information as baseline and then adjust their guesses from there. Just think about used car salesmen. They want to get as much money from you as possible for a car, and so they're going to start the bid, the price, as high as possible and then lower it from there. So that way, baseline is a really high number. That way you think, oh wow, they've lowered the price by $2,000. They're really giving us a good deal, even though the cost of the car is much less than that to begin with. So starting high is ideal for trying to sell something. Starting low is ideal when you're trying to buy something. Another characteristic of the primacy heuristic is the stability effect. And we see that early information tends to have a powerful impact on our impressions of others, and it tends to not be overridden by subsequent information. So if the first piece of information that we get about two different people is that one is friendly and one is intelligent, the rest of the characteristics could be exactly the same. We're going to have a lot better or higher impressions of the first person compared to the second person because of that initial information. This kind of forms the basis for what's known as thin slicing. And as humans, we're very good and surprisingly accurate at being able to predict characteristics and behaviors of individuals just by watching short snippets of behavior. So in one study, participants were shown 10-second clips of professors, college professors, from their first day of class, and then they were asked to predict what they were going to receive on their student evaluations at the end of the quarter or the semester. And they found that individuals, just from watching 10-second snippets of behaviors with no sound, were able to quite successfully predict their course evaluations and teaching evaluations at the end of the semester. So first impressions matter. You want to be as highly thought of as possible within those first few moments. So good advice for any of you going out and trying to get a job anytime soon. First impressions matter. We have the availability heuristic. This is the idea that information that is more easily available to us, could be how we think about it, is truer or has more weight to it. So one example is through ease of retrieval. If we're able to easily retrieve information or have an easy time thinking about information that people are asking us to retrieve, that means it must be true. So an example of this is, say participants were asked to either write down 3 times that they were assertive or 10 times they were assertive. Which of the two would you think that people would have an easier time with? Well, 3. But you might also think that if people are writing down 10 separate times in which they're assertive, that they would think that they are more assertive than people who are only writing down 3. Well, again, it's about ease of retrieval. People are typically easily able to think of 3 times that they are assertive, but they're not easily able to think of 10 times they were assertive. So these participants might think to themselves, wow, I could easily think of 3 times I was assertive, that must mean I'm assertive. Or people in the other condition were thinking, wow, I can't really, or I was having a difficult time thinking of 10 times I was assertive, that must mean I'm not very assertive. We can see this applied to other characteristics such as describe 3 times you've been accepted, for example, or 10 times you've been accepted. And people who are only thinking about 3 times that they're accepted, again, due to ease of retrieval, feel like they are more accepted, feel a greater sense of belonging. That can facilitate out-group acceptance, so accepting others from maybe different races or genders or religions. And it also increases the desire for interracial contact. So these tools, these tricks, these brain gymnastics can be used for good and not for evil sometimes. What's another characteristic of the availability heuristic? Well, this is known as the false consensus effect. This is the idea that information that's available to me is more likely to be true. And because I think this way, I'm more likely to think that other people are thinking the same way. So for example, participants in one study were asked to wear an Eat at Joe's sign outside around campus for 30 minutes. And then about 50% of participants actually agreed with the request, and 50% did not. But no matter what they chose, a vast majority of participants thought that other individuals, other participants, would choose to do the same thing as them, would feel the same way. So this is the idea that we believe that other people share our same consensus, share our same thoughts, ideas, feelings, beliefs, etc. This can manifest in interesting ways where you always hear a lot of uproar from people whenever a TV show is canceled, because if they watch it, then that must mean it's popular, that other people watch it, and how dare they cancel a TV show. I know I was pretty upset when Heroes was canceled, but thankfully it came back. Additionally, people can get upset when people don't vote for their presidential candidate that they're interested in, because they think if I'm voting for them, if I believe in their ideals, then that means other people, a lot of other people believe in their ideals. How come he wasn't or she wasn't elected? There's a conspiracy going on, etc., etc. We can also have what's known as a saliency bias. It's the idea that information or thoughts, ideas, concepts that are more salient or come to mind more easily, we believe that they also occur more frequently. So a great example of this is, think about the concepts of suicide, war, and homicide or murder. Which of those do you think occurs more frequently? Well, we hear about homicide and murder more often. We hear about wars more often, especially in movies and through politics. But we don't really hear about suicide very often. So people might think that wars and or murder occurs more frequently, but it's exactly the opposite. In fact, we see that suicides are more frequent than wars and murders combined. So it might generally be the case that things that are more salient generally occur more often, but it isn't always the case. And lastly, we have what's known as fluency. This is the idea that the more we encounter a stimulus, the easier it is to process. And the easier a stimulus is to process, the more we like it. And other characteristics, the more we find it attractive, the easier it feels, the more familiar it feels. We feel like it holds more truth. So it's the idea that repeated exposure to something makes us like something more. And this is only if the stimulus is either neutral or positively balanced. If we encounter something that we really don't like frequently, then we're going to dislike it even more. But the more you encounter something, so you might not have had strong feelings to carrots, but if you continuously encounter carrots over and over again, you're going to like it more. You're going to find them more delicious. This always also coincides with the ease of processing. The easier we're able to process information, the more we like it, the more truth we feel it holds, and the closer we feel to it. So ideally, if you want someone to like something, you want to make it as fluent as possible, and you want to repeat it or expose them to it as frequently as possible as well. Another heuristic that we use frequently is known as the representativeness heuristic. And this heuristic revolves a lot around likelihood estimates. So if we need to estimate the likelihood of something occurring, or the likelihood of something falling within a specific category, it can take a lot of mental work, and we don't always have time to do that. So we try and figure out, all right, how representative is this event of this category? If it is, then we think, yeah, it fits in well. If it isn't, then we might think, no, it doesn't really fit in, and we need to figure out a different category. So an individual who, say for example, enjoys chess, classical music, and wine, Is this person a truck driver or a college professor? Well, this example is more representative of the stereotype that we hold of a college professor, and not the stereotype we hold of a truck driver. So rather than actually assessing the proper information that we should figure out if we want to assess likelihood, we instead think, all right, what is this more representative of? A college professor? Okay, let's go with that. And let's say that it's more likely that this person is a college professor, even though more truck drivers actually exist compared to professors in real life. So if we're talking about pure likelihood, we would want to look at the kind of baseline numbers. How many truck drivers are there? How many college professors are there? We would think that it's going to be more likely, if there are more truck drivers, for that person to be a truck driver. We ignore these base rates that we should be using when determining likelihood. Another heuristic that we use is known as the conjunction fallacy. And this is the idea that we see more specific events as more likely, even though the exact opposite is true. Again, we're ignoring base rates here when we're falling into the conjunction fallacy. So for example, if we're told Scott loves hanging out with friends, partying on the weekends, and going to sporting events, we might have, using our stereotypes, a pretty good idea of who Scott is. If we're given two options, such as Jeff is a college student versus Jeff is a student and a member of a fraternity, because these characteristics fit the stereotype of a fraternity member, we're actually more likely to select the second option rather than the first. Even though, again, if we're going purely on base rates, it's going to be a lot more likely for that person to just be a student than to specifically be a student and a member of a fraternity. So again, we're ignoring base rates, and we're basically focusing on information that is falling into the stereotypes that we hold about other people, or in other situations, schemas that we hold about events or categories that we hold about objects. So that's all we have for today. Thank you for your time and attention. We will come back later with some more content.